Hi everyone, and welcome to another Split training. Today we're going to talk about how to handle our JavaScript SDK when the user quits the page. So to start with, we're going to show the flow for the JavaScript SDK in a typical browser implementation. So here we have two sides. One is the SDK itself, and the other side is the actual page JavaScript. They're both going to run on the same page though. In the beginning, of course, the factory will initialize and it's going to fetch split data from the split cloud. At the same time, we have the post metric and impression threads will start. So here we have four separate threads. Two will fetch split definitions and segment information, and the other two threads will post impression and metrics. Now, once the fetching of the split data is finished, the SDK ready event will fire. And at that time, the main page JavaScript will call getTreatment. Now, the getTreatment will store the impression generated into the SDK cache. And then, after a specific period of time, the post metric and impression thread starts again. Now, the threads will detect that there are impressions in the cache, and it's going to post them to Split Cloud. So what are the potential issues that we're presenting here? So one common issue is users on the back end of the browser are getting the correct treatments in the browser page, but the impressions that show up in the Split UI do not match the same number of user sessions that are returned on the server side. So we know the impressions are not getting sent to the Split backend. So one possible root cause is the post impression thread didn't run or didn't have enough time to run. And here is the flowchart for this issue. So first, the SDK factory and client initialize. SDK is ready, and the getTreatment is called. The correct treatment is returned. And then post impression thread runs in, here we set it to 60 seconds, and I think the default is either 60 or 30 seconds. Now, there are many possible actions that the user might take before the post impression thread starts, which is user closes the page, or user navigate away to a different domain, or the page itself redirect automatically, either via JavaScript or via HTML, or the user basically stays in the page and the post impression thread kicks in and sends the impressions correctly. So of course, only the fourth option, impressions are sent, but the first three options, the impressions will not be sent. And this is a common issue, especially if the user that is hitting the page usually don't stay long inside the page. They actually hit the page, see something, and then they move on quickly. So how do we resolve one of these potential root causes? Let's take the page redirected automatically, meaning our page has some kind of a JavaScript or HTML code that actually redirect the user to a different page. Now, in this issue, it's much easier to resolve since we do have control over our page and we do have control on when to redirect. So what we recommend is to use client.destroy, and the destroy method will basically immediately flush all the cache, the impressions and the events that are not sent to the Split Cloud. Now, what we also recommend is to wait for the destroy method to finish. The destroy method returns a promise, and when the promise is resolved, then we can actually do a callback to the main function that is doing the navigation away to a different page. Now, here is the tougher part where we need to handle if the user decides to navigate or close the page prematurely, of course, before the post impression thread runs. What we can do here is we can add client.destroy method to the window unload event. So this way, before the unload kick in and shut down the browser and unload the window, we actually can run the client destroy method. Now, there is one drawback here is we cannot guarantee that the client destroy will actually send the impression successfully before the unload event finishes and kills the whole page, because we don't have a way to control when we actually do the unload. So if we implemented the client destroy in the unload event, but we still see impressions mismatch count between the impressions that show up in the split UI and our server backend, then we can improve the time when the impression post thread actually runs. And this is by controlling the parameter impressions refresh rate. So the parameter by default is 60 seconds or 30 seconds. Now we can actually bring it down to 5 seconds. This way, after 5 seconds only of a user creating a treatment in the cache, the post-impression thread will kick in. Now, we can monitor and see if the 5 second actually works, but it's possible actually to change it to 1 second. This does not impact our page, since this thread basically will just check the cache of the browser or the SDK, and it will send an HTTP request or post HTTP request to Split Cloud only if there is content in the cache. So most of the time, the thread is running every 1 second, but it's basically not doing anything. And there's a very, very minimal CPU increase in the browser, but there's absolutely no network impact here. And even the CPU increase is very, very minimal. So we do recommend to actually use these values and play with them until we can actually see that all the impressions are counted for. Of course, this is dependent on how you construct your page, how is your user experience when they hit your page, and how much time you expect the users to stay after the get treatment is called. Thank you for watching. Please head to our Split help page for more information in our user guides and knowledge base articles.